What's going on, everyone? This is Zen from Zen Multiverse, and I hope you're having a great day. WandaVision just dropped, okay? We only got episode one and two, but what we got was quite a bit, right? So, what I'm going to do right now, before we even get started on the storyline, my thoughts, my opinions on it, is I'm simply going to just go through the process of just checking my connection to make sure everything is good and I sound good. Oh, I sound wonderful. All right, team. So I'm gonna get into Easter eggs, all of that, my theories, and yeah, and hopefully you guys have some questions that come up a little bit later. Okay. So with that being said, we are gonna start. So first and foremost, WandaVision did premiere. Um, I believe it was January 15th of 2021. That's crazy to see that we're in 2021, right? Number one, the show takes a lot of references from uh, the early 50s, 60s, and will continue with other shows, right? So, and there's a reason for that, right? But just to get into the presentation of the movie itself, the movie, it does feel like a movie. The presentation of this show, WandaVision, is number one, very nostalgic. If you were born in the eras of like the 50s or the 60s and you're a comic book lover, number one, it's going to come up as a nostalgic feeling, right? For me, I was born in the 80s, right? But shows like Bewitched and I Love Lucy were shows that were in, my mom would watch and then I would be playing in the background. So to hear like little tidbits created a lot of nostalgic feeling, right? For a lot of people, it especially if you're on the younger side, you might be like, this is kind of confusing. This is a little bit different and such forth. And that's exactly what it's going to be, right? It's not meant to be exactly what we see in the movies. It's meant to bring a different light, a different perspective, and in this case, a different reality into what's happening in the mind and the surroundings of Wanda Maximoff, which is the Scarlet Witch. Okay. Now, just to give you a little backstory, right? So that before we get into the actual show itself, Wanda and Vision, they are, they were a couple, okay? Now, if in the events of Endgame, we did see, right? And I don't think it's spoilers now because, everyone should have saw Endgame by now. If you're coming to this video and you didn't see Endgame, I don't know what's going on, right? But in the events of Endgame, uh, Vision did come to his demise, right? He came to his death. He came to a point where he was no longer living, essentially, right? And he has the Mind Stone embedded in him through the creation of Tony Stark created him Bruce, well, along with Bruce Banner, and he's the binding of consciousnesses, right? Of Tony Stark, uh, Jarvis, his AI, artificial intelligence, right? And also Ultron. The collision of the three came together to basically make Vision, right? He's kind of like the best parts of all of them, right? Or part of the best parts of all of them, right? And but basically, he formed a relationship with Wanda, right? Now Wanda comes from she comes from Sokovia, right? And her brother, which is Pietro Maximoff, he also comes from Sokovia too. Now, the reason why those two, Wanda Maximoff and basically Pietro are important is because their powers were catalyzed by the Mind Stone, right? Now, Pietro did die, okay? Now, there's a reason why I'm telling you all of this because it's going to lead into why Wanda is the way she is right now. Now, just to get a little bit more into it, when we're talking about emotional scale, right? Now imagine, right? Your loved one, right? Your wife, your husband, whoever, right? Passed away. Your brother, who you grew up with and went through trials and tribulations, passed away, right? How would you feel? Think about that for a second. How would you feel, right? Now, Wanda's powers are very different from Pietro. Pietro, her brother, um, he basically had super speed, right? And for her, her abilities weren't as defined as when we first saw her, right? It just looked like she was manipulating items and moving them on a telekinetic scale, right? But come to find out, she has telekinetic abilities. And also, she was able to kind of warp a mental scape, right? And when I say a mental scape, we'll notice that in previous movies, even her first introduction, that she did things to Tony Stark, right? In the Age of Ultron, and she also warped the Hulk, right? Bruce Banner's mind, right, to make him go kind of crazy. Now, at that point, we're like, oh, that's her powers, right? She could kind of like move things with her mind, and she has a little bit of, um, you know, warped version of like telepathy, right? Wrong, right? Her powers go far beyond that. And before I continue, just want to give a shout out to everyone who's watching the video, right? Um, so if you're just watching and you just want to learn more about the story, then that's what it is. Appreciate everyone who's coming to just be in in the video. I'll take questions towards the end of everything, right? So stick around. The show is going to be really good, and there might be some extra tidbits in there. So please be there, right? And if you have questions about any scenes or anything about uh the basically WandaVision, drop them in the chat. Shout out to Sans Skeleton for being the first one here, right? So just continuing on, again, her powers weren't as nuanced as we thought they were, right? We come to find out she has the ability to warp reality in some kind of ways. And even in Endgame, we saw that her powers were just really phenomenal in terms of how it is when it's infused with emotion, right? So even when she was going against Thanos, I don't think anyone could deny the fact that Wanda was going to really destroy Thanos at the end of Endgame, but she was intervened, right? And that's why it came down to the conclusion with Tony Stark and him doing the snap, right? So with that being said, that's kind of like the story so far of Wanda Maximoff, even Pietro, and even Vision, right? Um, their connection is a binding of the time stone, which is probably why they came together, right? Not why they fell in love with each other, but they found a likeness in each other, right? That they're different, but somehow connected, right? Just so just getting in there again, drop guys, you all in the chat, keep dropping questions because I'm going to keep answering them, right? So before we continue, we're gonna drop that intro, and then we're gonna get into the story of WandaVision and also some of the things that happen in there with the Easter eggs, right? All the Easter eggs that I found, basically, there's a ton more, and also theories around some of the Easter eggs and the storyline. So let's get started, team. All right, team. So, getting into some of the Easter eggs that we saw in the actual show. Now, just to give you a little understanding about the show is takes place in what is presumed, and this is going to start off with a theory, right? So, if we're starting off with a theory, uh, Wanda Wanda is basically she's the Scarlet Witch. We know her in the comic book. She is, defined as Scarlet Witch. But for her, kind of let's go back a little bit. Um, in the actual show itself, it takes place in what seems to be the 50s or even the 50s or even the late 50s, right? Now, but you might wonder, if I watch Endgame, why is it taking place in this kind of era? Now, what we need to understand is that reality is warped, right? And just get into some theories before we get into the Easter eggs. My and I'm pretty sure, I'm 100%, I'm very confident that this is what it is, that what we're viewing is a pocket reality in WandaVision, right? A pocket reality meaning that there's a surrounding of a reality, right? But there's a pocket, right? There's a pocket reality that's going on in the midst of everything on the outside, right? So when we're looking at the actual show, right? You'll notice that there's a TV going on, right? You see it from the perspective of a TV. Now, where does that kind of fall in, right? That falls into basically what my understanding and my linking of the theory is that Wanda, as a child, even with Pietro, right? We don't hear Pietro's name or anything included in the first two episodes, but what we can surmise is that Wanda is alternate reality, right? On a micro scale because I said pocket reality, right? It's not on a universal scale or a worldly scale yet, right? But she is alternate reality in a pocket perimeter, right? And based on that pocket perimeter, she's utilizing things that she's seen growing up, right? Now, remember, she came from Sokovia, right? And she grew up and saw a lot. And you'll see some of this throughout the Easter eggs within the show. And she may have watched a lot of shows that were from the 50s, such as I Love Lucy, Bewitched, The Dick Van Dyke Show, and shows of that nature. The reason why we know that, we'll kind of get into some of the Easter eggs in a little bit, okay? And so let's officially begin. All right, so let's look over here, right? Kind of come into the analysis and comparison. Now, if you look at this picture on the left, now the picture on the left is them when they're coming in, they're newlywed of husband and wife. But you look at the bottom, this is a reference to what you see from one of the older shows from the 50s, the Dick Van Dyke Show, right? The comparison is very is very similar, right? And then we go to the right, and here's another kind of like nod to Endgame. She says, "My husband and his indestructible head," which kind of gives relevance into the time when she officially was trying to take or destroy the Mind Stone before Thanos got to it. But what happened was she did destroy it and essentially killed Vision. But Thanos came with the Time Stone and reversed time to the point right before she destroyed it and then was able to extract the Mind Stone from him, thus killing him. Now, some of you are probably wondering, so if Vision is dead, how is he here? We're going to get into that, okay? So let's continue with some of the Easter eggs within the show and also what they mean. Here's another one. 23, and there's a heart right on above it. Now, in the show, they're trying to figure out day what's the importance of this day, right? August 23rd. Why is it so important? And they come to the understanding and they're saying, like, oh, it has to do with their anniversary. And then when Vision goes to work, he's like, no, we have a dinner date with the Harts, right? Mr. and Mrs. Hart. And Mr. Hart is basically his boss, right? But also, this is something a little bit deeper, right? This, if you count the number 23, this is kind of a nod to the 23 MCU movies that made up the MCU, right? All the movies that we've seen from Iron Man all the way up until Endgame, right? So it gives a nod into that a lot of people didn't really catch, right? The 23 is very significant. Let's move on. Now, one of the most important characters within this show, WandaVision, is Agnes. Agnes is so important. If you read the comic books, you'll know that Agnes is really Agatha Harkness. Okay. Now, some of you are probably like, well, her name is Agnes. How could she be Agatha Harkness, right? So, team, let's break down Agatha and then Harkness, right? So, hold on. Let's go back, team. If you write out Agatha Harkness and you use the first couple of letters, Ag, right? And then Nis, right? Then you get Agnes, right? Which is Agatha Harkness. Just the first couple letters and the last couple letters in the last name. Put it together, you get Agatha, right? So pretty you get Agnes, sorry, you get Agnes. And basically, just to give a little understanding about where she is, you'll notice that while I'm doing this review, I'm not getting too much in the comic books because a lot of you may not have read the comic books, right? But I do have to do a comparison so we understand who she is, right? So, uh, Agnes, in this contemporary pocket reality, seems to just be a neighbor, right? She seems to be a neighbor who is very friendly to Wanda, right? And she seems pretty nice and cool, right? She seems exactly how one of the neighbors would be in some of these older shows, right? From the 50s and 60s, right? Nothing really um kind of funky or weird about that, right? But we can see that she is overly happy or overly excited to be in Wanda's business, so to speak, right? She is the nosy neighbor. And if you have read comic books, you'll know that Agatha Harkness, right, is presented as an elderly woman that does have abilities. What kind of abilities? Magical abilities, right? Hex magic or chaos magic, right? Mostly referred as chaos magic, right? Now, it's we're gonna see, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna see that her powers are actually chaos magic, right? Um, Maybe they're going to be defined as something else, because we're in the MCU and things are changing dramatically, which I'm in love with, right? I don't want it to be the exact same thing from the comic books, but we are introduced to some of the characters in the comic books. Now, just to go back into Agnes, right, or Agatha Harkness, in the comic book, she is a witch. Okay, just like we just heard for Rose Tiger Comics, who mentioned in the comment section in the chat, she's definitely a witch. Now, in the comic books, a lot of people don't know this. She actually started off her introduction. Yes, she's a witch, but she started off as kind of like the babysitter for um, the babies in the Fantastic Four, right? So, but then it came to fruition that she has nefarious kind of plans, right? But over time, we see the transition of her basically manipulating, right? Wanda. But then going back into the show itself, that's what we're trying to find out, right? Um, we're trying to find out if she is exactly who she is in the comic books, which I think she is, right? And one of the things that we'll later kind of go into in episode 2 is the that Wanda is pregnant, right? I'm kind of jumping back and forth between episode 1 and 2, but there's a reason why I said that, and there's a reason why I said babysitter, because I do surmise that um, in the comic book, she was a babysitter for Franklin Richards, right? And I think what's going to happen is that eventually Agnes is going to say, "Hey, I'll take care of the kids for a little bit, right?" And go through the process of some kind of manipulation. So they'll tie a little bit of this in, right? And just to kind of give you some pictures on what Agnes or Agatha Harkness looks like in the comic book, this is the kind of elderly state that I mentioned, right? Um, and kind of going through the process of manipulation. So if you haven't already, drop that like, team, okay? And keep dropping those questions in the comment section. All right, team, let's go on to the next Easter egg that I found in the show. Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Zen from Zen Multiverse. If you're watching this video right now, that is not me. This video is not for me. That is an alternate reality version of me. Okay? So what I need you to do to bring back who I am is to drop a like on this video, share the video, comment your favorite part, because that will cause a feedback loop within this reality time stream. This is the only way it's gonna work. Guys, I need you to save me so we can take back the multiverse. I'm counting on you. I'm sorry, team. Wait, what just happened? I'm sorry about that. I don't know, my computer is glitching a little bit. Kind of froze. I'm not too sure what was going on. Let's get back into our discussion and the Easter eggs. Sorry about that, team. So if we if we continue, here's another Easter egg that's within the show, and this is a wine glass. Now it just looks like a normal wine glass that says Memphis, right? But if you do a translation, the translation equates to um, just basically house of, right? And if you see, there's a big M there. Now, this is a nod to House of M. Now, House of M was one of the most pivotal points in mutant history, um, basically, right? So it is super important. House of M is, it's everything, right? So that translation is House of Contempt, and then when we get the M, it basically combines to be House of M, which is when Wanda Maximoff warped reality and basically gave everyone their favorite version of everything, their ideal lifestyle, right? Now, there was a form of manipulation going on, but we're not going to get into the actual story of House M, but it's a phenomenal book that you should go and check out. Now, let's continue with some of the Easter eggs. Now, here's another one. This one is really simple. Throughout the show, you'll see a sword and a circle, right? This is reference to sword, right? Um, and sword is a kind of think about sword as a organization like Shield, right? That deals with basically on a galactic scale, right? Sentient world, um, kind of like an organization, right? It's kind of like the the space version of Shield, right? That's in the comic books. Now they might have a different um, definition, right? And when I say definition, they might have a different take on what it is, but we'll find out, right, throughout the show. But they do pop up quite a bit. Now let's get into some more comparisons on where some of the show is taken nods from, right? Here's another one. If you look at this one, this is what I was talking about. I Love Lucy, right? So you could YouTube I Love Lucy, but you'll see, the separation of the beds because that's how it was back in the day, and it's just very you can see the parallel to it, right? From Wanda to Lucy to Ricky and then Vision, right? And then as the episode shift to episode 2, then we get nod to Bewitched, right? Time is kind of like moving forward a little bit, right? But also the nods into the possible shows that Wanda used to watch in Sokovia when she was younger, right? So let's continue. All right. Here's another one. This one isn't really too much, but if you pay attention to it, it it gives you a hint into what's happening, right? Home is where you make it, right? This is a saying that many people have heard, right? Welcome to Westview. Home is where you make it. Now, it's really a telling of what Wanda is doing. She picked a place and she made it home. Literally, she made it home. She made it what it is, and what we see is what she created. Now, there's a flux that happens, right? And here are some of the flux states, right? Now, again, here comes the sword logo, right? Where she picks up the helicopter. Now, the helicopter for me is, and I could be completely wrong. This is basically sword trying to get into her pocket reality, right? But every time they come into her pocket reality, on a unconscious or subconscious level, right? And the reason why I said unconscious and subconscious is because when she's sleeping, she's still altering the pocket reality around her, right? And consciously, while she's doing everything she's doing in the daily scape of Westview, she is still altering reality, which is when you think about it, that is massive, right? But I think that's Sword trying to get into the pocket reality, and basically one of their helicopters just turned into a toy. uh, Very simple, right? One of the characters that I think a couple of characters were able to get in, and one of them is Geraldine. Geraldine is number one, a beautiful character, right? But she's also someone that we've seen before, right? If you've seen the Captain Marvel, whatever you think about that movie, whether you think it's great, whether you think it's bad, um, Monica Rambeau, which is actually Geraldine is actually Monica Rambeau. She was in it, right? She was the little girl, right? And this is her growing up, which gives you relevance that if you kind of skip in years, this is present time, right? And this is she was able to get in. She is, I believe, right, that she is a member of Sword. And but what happened is she was able to get close, maybe because of her personality, but she also is swamped up, right? Or scooped up into the pocket reality. Thus, the reason she doesn't really remember, right? Anything that's going on, because her mind is kind of warped, right? And we already know that this is quite easy, right? She's done this to Tony Stark and also to Bruce Banner back in the day, right? So for where her power set is right now and the echelon of where she is, this is rather easy to do it to multiple people. Let's continue. Now, as you could see, again, there are parts of the show where Wanda starts to get confused or stunted. And during these times, reality starts to shift on a micro level, right? For example, this radio. The radio starts to say things like, Wanda, Wanda, who's doing this to you? Wanda, 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 right? And in even the colorization that happens within the show when we see the helicopter earlier, this gives you a nod into it's shifting the reality, right? How do we know this? Because Wanda wanted it to be like those old school TV shows, those perfect family TV shows, right? Where things are funny, the dry humor, and you know, they're easy to kind of go through, right? But she has trouble controlling it at times, right? And those are the times when she and Vision say they need to fit in, right? Or we get the helicopter, right? That has color on it, right? It's made its way in, okay? Um, but at this scene, right? There's a scene that we'll talk about in that happens within the show where they have dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Hart, and um, Mr. Hart basically asks a lot of questions. He asks so many questions that during dinner he starts to choke. And at that point, his wife starts to say, Stop it, stop it, stop it. It's kind of a trope that happens in a lot of old school shows where they kind of repeat the same thing, but it also is emotional output from the Mrs. Hart that's trying to tell Wanda, please stop this. I know that you're doing this, and it's her trying to permeate through um, on an emotional scale, Wanda's kind of control over the reality. And eventually she thinks about it. And the reason why Mr. Hart is kind of choking is because he's asking questions that are leading Wanda to be confused, right? When did you get married? When did this happen? What's your story? And she's part of it is she's basically hidden away, right? On a mental scale. But let's continue. I know it's pretty interesting. All right, let's get into more of the tidbits. Now, Struckers, right? And you see Hydra here, right? So the Struckers are basically from Hydra. Now, if you pay attention to Age of Ultron and even prior to that, you'll see that they were utilizing the Strucker, right? Strucker was I forgot his first name. I think it's Eric von Strucker, right? That he was utilizing the Mind Stone in order to do experimentation on Pietro and Wanda, right? For me, this gives relevance on time is ticking, right? That time is ticking in terms of what's happening in the reality, the pocket reality that Wanda has, but also she's kind of bringing um, basically traumatic experiences to the forefront. Or maybe I'm reaching here, right? But I think I'm right. Here's another basically invasion into the pocket reality, and this comes from the Beekeeper. On the back of it, you see Sword again, right? Do I think Sword is bad in this show? I don't think so, right? And the reason why I'm saying that is because of Monica Rambeau. What I think is happening is they're trying to get into the pocket reality to help Wanda, but to also help their comrades, right? Like Monica Rambeau. But Wanda, in this scene, Wanda looks at him and she's like, no. And then she basically reverses time to the point when she is talking to Vision, right? Which gives a nod into she just wants things to be the way she made it, right? Home is where you make it, right? She wants it to be that way. And in this sense, she kind of changed the reality again. How do we know? She becomes pregnant. She becomes pregnant. And remember, Vision is an artificial intelligence. He is a synthetic humanoid, right? I think that's a better terminology. He's a synthetic humanoid, right? So he doesn't have the capabilities to, you know, to mate with her, right? On the normal scale in terms of what we know about biology and reproduction, right? She warps into reality her being pregnant, which is gonna uh, tie into episode 3 and 4 as well, right? But let's get into this some more, right? This show is really interesting and I really dig it, right? A lot of people, some people really love it, and some people are like, this is not what I'm used to. I'm so glad that it's not things that we're used to, right? Um, Now let's go back into Agatha. Agatha is the only one in this show that doesn't seem to be phased by anything, right? If anything, she seems to be the one that's kind of helping things go along, right? Um, but I believe that this is the form of manipulation that's going on. Now, something to kind of make way, right? A lot of people surmise that she is working for someone, right? She's working for Nightmare, which is a character of uh, basic, basically a multi-universal uh, entity, right? Or a big bad guy within the Marvel universe, and also Mephisto, right? Mephisto is another one of those multi-universal powerful characters within the Marvel comic universe, right? The reason why I do agree that she is working for someone, right, is because she often makes nods to her husband. And she makes little jokes and cracks and like if he was here, da 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 da, right? Um, I think she's actually talking about one of those characters, right? But I think what I believe is happening is she's receiving orders, right, to investigate this person, which is Wanda, and to escalate her powers to a certain level. Why? I don't know. Maybe to bring one of them from their universe to this current universe, right? Because they can't leave their dimension, rather, right? We already know that this is WandaVision is the prequel to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, right? Do I think that WandaVision is going to end well? I don't think it's going to end with a good ending, but it's going to be one that asks a lot of even more questions, right? Uh, a ton of questions, right? There's so much going on here, right? This is the 28th that just kind of goes back to what we talked about before, right? Nothing really important here. And this one is super important too. Now they show this in the show. They show this in the show. Forget the past. This is your future. Toastmate 2000. Okay, Stark Enterprises. Another traumatic experience that Wanda and also Pietro had is, all of the weaponry that was made by Tony Stark, and they saw a missile that didn't blow up in front of them, and they looked at it, and it said Stark Industries, right? It shows it shows two things, right? It shows the daunting traumatic past, but it also gives nod to moving forward, right? Forget about the past and basically dig a deep hole and put those memories away and make your own future. So there's a lot going on there, right? So team, this I'll kind of get into some questions now before we kind of, and I know that was a lot, right? Let me look at the comments section. All right. Shout out to Sans Skeleton and um, Azora's Tiger Comments. Appreciate you. One of the first question is I have a question. What is Wanda? All right. That's a great question. Now, in the show, they didn't really define mutant, right? Because at the time they couldn't, right? The Disney didn't own the rights to say mutants, right? They do now. Okay. So they just kind of basically said that they were, just basically humans that have special abilities, right? That were catalyzed by the Mind Stone. We're not too sure, right? Um, I think now we're gonna kind of now remember earlier in our show, right? And we've been talking for about 34 minutes about all the different Easter eggs that we saw, right? Shout out to Steven. Shout out to M. Cortez. Appreciate you guys for coming to hang out a little bit to talk about WandaVision. Now, in House of M, she warped reality. Towards the end of that, it led into her saying something, right? A phrase that many people know, and she said, "No more mutants." No more. Now, in the comic books, there were already existing mutants, right? But no more mutants meant anyone who had capabilities like herself meant that they were either gone, they were just gone. But what actually happened is she removed their powers. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, and but it is because she removed millions and millions and millions, billions of powers, right? Power sets for many mutants. But it came under our understanding from continuing to read comics that she didn't just do it within the universe of the 616, right? She did it on a multi-universal scale, right? She stripped the powers from mutants from pretty much multiple universes and realities, which is wildly powerful, right? Which is why I think that they're going to lead into the understanding that it's actually chaos magic that she's utilizing or tapping into. But I believe what's going to happen in this show, right? Maybe not in this show, or maybe in the multiverse of madness, that she's going to do a reverse version of no more mutants. I think she's going to get into a depressive state that there is no one like her, and she feels like she's alone, and that's going to cause a emotional outburst, right? Where she sends a shockwave throughout all of reality, that instead of no more mutants, she's going to wish for more mutants. Like someone's going to say something like we have to kill this mutant, and people are basically going to, and she's going to basically go into this kind of chaotic um flux, right? And the reason why I'm saying this now, again, imagine this team, right? Pietro, her brother, who she's lived with, gone through everything with, he died. The love of her life, Vision, he died. She brought him back, which we'll talk about in a little bit. How is she able to bring him back? Um, and I think by the end of the show, this pocket perfect reality is going to come crashing down on her, right? That emotional outburst is going to cause her to possibly, again, this is a theory, that she's going to eventually say something like more mutants, right? Or more people like her, which will then activate um, a mutant gene within a set population, right? I think this is going to tie into two different things, right? Which is why the Eternals is very important, because as we know, if you read comic books, the in the Eternals, they're tied with the Celestials, and the Celestials are basically uh, galactic scientists, right? That are wildly capable and powerful. Some of them, most of them are scientists, right? And they come to each planet and they do quite a bit, right? Now, when they came to Earth, they experimented on the existing humanoids at the time, right? The primates, and they were able to see three variations. Basically, the deviants, the Eternals, right? And also um, mutants. Rather, not mutants, humans, right? And the humans were able to kind of deviate into two variations, right? Which we have um, Homo sapiens and Homo superiors, which would be mutants. Okay, why does that matter anyway? Because the Eternals movie is coming out. I think what they're gonna allude to is that people already had that mutant gene already. They just needed a catalyst to spark it. And maybe it was time. But maybe what might happen is Wanda might activate things a little bit sooner than they're supposed to, right? Instead of the process of long-term evolution. I could be totally wrong. Um, totally wrong. Or I could be totally right. Well, you heard it here, okay? You heard it here first. So yeah, I think there's a couple of things that could happen. Now, the next question that I saw was, do you think we're gonna get mutants in this series? I don't think we're gonna get mutants in this series. I think we're gonna get a spark of hope that will lead us to believe that either in the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, mutants are coming, or maybe what happens is she alters reality and eventually she falls in. madness, right? And she goes through the process of seeing multiple realities or multiple universes. And what actually happens is she sees a Earth, right? A sister Earth, right? Think about it like many worlds theory, right? That there's a many worlds theory is just basically, or um, parallel world just means that there's another sister or brother Earth directly next to on a different plane of existence, and they're just like your Earth but different. So there what I do theorize as an alternative theory is that there's one Earth that is the Avengers type of Earth, right? The MCU that we know and love right now. And there's another Earth that is basically Earth that could be with mutants, right? It could be the first one, reverse no more mutants, or it could be that in the multiverse of madness that we see mutants come up, right? In a different in a parallel universe, right? Could be totally wrong, right? But if I'm right, that might lead into something else, an incursion, right? Now, not to talk about DC and what they did on the CW, but the Crisis on Infinite Earths did something very similar, right? Now, the incursion, which we've had in the comic books for Marvel comic books, right, could be like the worlds kind of collide and one Earth has to go against one Earth, or they're both gonna die, or one will die, right? And it might come to X-Men versus Avengers. I am stretching so far. I'm reaching so far right now. But just think about it, right? Everything that I said is plausible if they write the story in that way, right? That through the multiverse of madness, they see another alternate Earth. Through the multiverse of madness, which is the Doctor Strange movie, one is also going to be a part of it. That there's a tear in reality. The tear in reality causes an incursion, two Earths that are coming colliding with each other, and one thinks that the other one is doing something wrong. They both try to fight each other. The X-Men are on one, or mutants are on one. The Avengers world is on another one. They come to fight each other, but then they realize that there's a bigger baddie within the whole scape of this whole thing, and then they realize that they have to work together. The outcome of the story is that the both Earths collide together, but it also causes the fusion of two Earths, and we have mutants and the Avengers, superpowered beings on one Earth. Am I reaching? Maybe. Do I like what I'm saying? Absolutely. So, um, uh, so guys, I'm gonna wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. We talked quite a bit about WandaVision. I can't wait to do an updated video for episode 3 and 4, or whatever drops next week. Um, so with that being said, this is Zen from Zen Multiverse saying peace, love, and prosperity. If you're enjoying my content, drop me a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video with like-minded people. After the video, drop your favorite part, and I'll catch you all later for the next one. Take care, everyone. I see the reality shifting a little bit, but I don't think that we hit enough likes in order for me to come back. I'm gonna try to do some things on my end, but I really need you to share the video, to drop a like, and to comment. Bring back Zen. Okay, the real Zen. Bring back the real Zen. And comment your favorite part of the video. This way, I know which parts to really find a gateway into coming back. I'm counting on you, team.